All right.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Ruth.
So, hello everyone. I'm Ruth Catlow. Welcome to Art Projects 2020 Art and Text Expo. The panel that we're here to join today is the Art Organizations Exploring Blockchain, Finding Opportunity in the Digital. I'm artistic director and co-founder of Furtherfield and the Decentralized Arts Lab in London. Furtherfield's been going since the mid-90s. We really kind of grew up with the web and have been fascinated in the potential for artists organizing differently, using decentralized tech since that time. And then the Decentralized Arts Lab has come to look for fairer and more connected ways for artists to benefit from Web3 and blockchain technologies. So this is a very short panel. We've had one dropout, which means that we can feel a little bit more spacious. But firstly, I'd just like to thank Jessica and Brian for inviting us to participate in this great event. And rather than introducing the panel members, I thought it would save time and we'd get a truer and more dynamic feel for people if they could introduce themselves. So maybe if you could introduce yourselves and maybe in that say what drew you to start exploring blockchain. So maybe Devang, if you would like to kick off.
Sure. Thanks, Ruth. And thank you again, Jessica and team, for inviting us for speaking at this panel. I'm Devang. I'm currently advising Christie's on all things digital technology and product. My background is mostly in the technology world. I sort of grew up at Microsoft, where I was an intern in Bill Gates' office back in the early 2000s, building Windows XP, and stayed for almost a decade and a half and built every operating system since Windows XP. And around 2015, I heard of this little company called Artsy that was building technology for the art market. And I had grown up in my mom's little art studio in Bombay. And I took the leap of faith to help build Artsy when they were a 50 to 60 person organization. So since 2015, I'd helped grow that business. And just since last year, I've been advising Christie's a little bit on digital, but taken on that more seriously this year and continue to hope to do more of that. The reason I got interested in blockchain or have been looking at blockchain for the last year or 2 years is predominantly because I think blockchain today is like the internet in the 80s. The internet in the 80s was a few people had access to the internet. They would sit in front of a green screen with lots of numbers floating back and forth. Until the browser came along, the masses didn't really understand the potential of the internet. So I think blockchain today, the technology behind blockchain is like where the internet was in the 80s and 90s. In terms of power to the people, in terms of access, in terms of democracy, it has some of those same fundamental principles similar to the internet. And it's also very hard to understand as a common end user who wants to buy a bag of potatoes in the grocery store. So it's still not commonplace, but it can get there if we put the right investment and the right technology in front of it. And it's as a role of a technologist, that's why I look at these upcoming future tech pieces to see how companies in mainstream, like Christie's, like Artsy, like Microsoft, who I advise, can stay in the know when it comes to technologies like blockchain. So that's what excites me.
Thank you. It's funny to hear you say that you think the blockchain's at the state the internet was in the 80s. I like 3 years ago. So I'm an artist first, and I heard myself describe the blockchain as where the internet was at in the early 90s. 3 years ago. It seems like it's moving away from us and backwards. Misha, could you introduce yourself and just say a little bit about what drew you into the blockchain space?
Absolutely. So I'm one of the founders of Snark Gut Art. My background is more technical on one end, but I also have been involved in video art projects for about 10 years. And when we started hearing about the first experiments using blockchain tech in 2017, it got me interested more at that time, you had your initial projects like CryptoPunks and CryptoKitties, where the idea of digital scarcity was kind of redefined, or there was a new way to identify how digital content can, or its ownership can be assigned to an individual. And at that time, for us, what was interesting is not necessarily the digital scarcity itself, but can we start thinking about blockchain as powering more social interactive experiences? And what's there beyond just putting the same art that existed prior to 2018 onto the blockchain? Maybe there is more to it. And so the first experiments that we did is we went to video artists that we knew, and we started exploring ideas of how maybe a community can have an interactive experience with a video artwork. And so we created the first artwork, which was where artist Eve Sussman, she reimagined her 2003 piece, 89 Seconds in Alcazar, and she broke it into thousands of video fragments, where every owner of a video fragment, also the video fragment, it is like an NFT, so it has this digital scarcity element, but it also has a programmed logic mechanics that allows every owner to request from the rest of the community their fragments for 24 hours. So it was on the one hand solving an issue for Eve where her artwork was already sold out, all the editions were in major museums or private collections, and the artwork basically was rarely seen. It would be maybe part of some exhibition, and if you were lucky enough to be there geographically, you would be able to see it. But now she wanted the artwork to actually be spread out all over the world and to give more people an opportunity to view it. And so this kind of kind of hybrid model of ownership slash kind of participation slash.
But I think it also kind of created this idea that collectors would have to act communally to see the work together, like so that you could make the work visible by being one of the collectors. And I thought that was a really interesting element.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're exactly right in the sense that even Eve kept on saying how what was interesting about it is that the act of acquiring an artwork is not the end of the story, that essentially it's just the beginning of the experience, and each participant can choose not to share their fragments or can choose to view it or organize a screening. So it was just maybe one of the initial experiments that we did, but through that experience we saw that there was a lot more potential, and maybe we're not even seeing all of it at the moment. We're still in the very early stages, maybe internet of the 60s and 70s. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of potential for blockchain technology in a way that artists can reach a much wider audience and can create more kind of digital interactive experiences while still like kind of. Another thing is the commercial element, because artists need to make money to survive, and so this is another possibility for them to reach audience, to benefit financially and create interesting projects at the same time.
Okay, so let's get concrete, and we'll go back to Devang, and then I'll come back to you, Misha. So what developments are you most excited about at the moment about your own work in the blockchain art space, like right now? What's the thing that's really exciting you that you're working on?
Yeah, great point, Ruth. I think as you take a more practical view of what works today, like Christie's, for example, a 300-year-old institution, trying to apply something that may become mainstream in like 10 years from now, it has to lay some building blocks up, right? You can't build Rome in a day. So what are some of the things that have been used, as I've seen in the last year or two? One is a year and a half ago, Christie's did a partnership with Artery, which is one of those provenance and verification systems for the Barney Ebsworth collection. That entire auction, the results of it, the provenance of all the works was written on a ledger that was powered by Artery. So to answer your main question, there are two approaches that Christie's has taken. when it comes to practical application. One is the authentication and provenance piece, where they've used Artery to make sure that all the results of the auction are written back to the blocks on Artery's blockchain. And the second approach they've taken is with blockchain art. So as you may have seen in the last auction season around October, there was one artist, specifically Benjamin Tilly, who's a London-based artist who works with Robert Alice project, auctioned off a disc that that had, I think, around 300,000 or so digits of code on it that together fitted onto a blockchain of some sort. And that object itself was auctioned in one of Christie's auctions. This was the first time like a actual piece was auctioned, and it went, I think, 6 or 7 times its low estimate. The bidding started at around $20,000, and it went all the way up to 130. So 2 practical applications. We've sold blockchain art, and we applied the sort of power to the people provenance technology to sort of the core of our business, because that's one area where we can experiment a little bit without going too out there, since the tech is not fully mainstream.
And for you, what's the kind of most exciting thing about either of those things? Like, why are these things significant?
Yeah, I think in the art world, we've always said, for the art world specifically, the biggest challenge for it to become mainstream or adopted more globally is the opacity, right? The art world has always been very opaque. We whether it comes to sort of pricing, ownership, all of that data is pretty opaque, especially on the primary market. When it comes to auctions, that data becomes much more transparent because auction results are reported, etc. What excites me is blockchain fundamentally starts by transparency and power to the people. While the data and privacy still is at the core of blockchain, everyone has access to the results. Everyone has access to the pricing. I think with that democracy, the art world may grow much quicker than it has in the last decade or so. That's what excites me about blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have enough time to drill down into this, but I'm kind of like, I have a question mark over the idea whether transparency immediately equates to the democratization of the art world, and that is a really big conversation, I think.
Of course, and I agree with you. It's not a one-year thing. It's not maybe even a decade thing, but the foundational elements do come from blockchain. It could take us a while for it to become fully transparent, but this is the first technology where I'm seeing the seeds of transparency being laid.
Yeah, I hear myself saying very similar things to that, and then but it is the kind of thing where we really want a longer conversation that we're not going to get now, because we must now hear from Misha. Like, what's the thing that either you're working on right now, or that you some other project that you see happening in this space right now that most excites you?
I mean, I think that what we're seeing a little bit at the moment is it's giving a major push for digital art, because traditionally digital art has always been like a drop in the ocean in terms of the overall art market. And we're seeing kind of a lot more engagement and possibilities for digital art to become a larger share of art. But the thing that is kind of interesting, the developments that we're seeing, is that a lot more tools are becoming available for the artists. So like, whereas like even when we launched 3 years ago, the idea that an artist can tokenize their artwork was something that was too far-fetched for majority of artists. Now you have platforms that are offering this functionality, and I think these types of tools and some of the tools that we're developing will become more available, in the sense that it's not going to be maybe not just tokenizing the artwork, but maybe integrating into some experience. And these types of tools will kind of, I strongly believe that like art world is really lagging in terms of accepting of digital output. And I think that's going to become a major share, because every other industry right now is kind of converting into digital space, and everything is experienced in like devices like this. And why can't artists participate in this transition and create more content that would ultimately, I mean, we're 90% of the time we're like staring at these black rectangles, whether on our laptops or TV screens or phones. And I think blockchain technology will empower it. We just have to create more tools so that artists can do it easily.
So we have a question from Facebook, which is like, I think basically they're asking, is there a website where they can actually look at something interesting going on, where they can see the things we're talking about being applied? Do you want to give examples that we could send people to look at?
Yeah, I'm reading the question. The question is like, I think the first question is about integrating blockchain into their personal websites. That's definitely doable, and I'm sure there's some easy guides out there that tell you how to connect your website so it's like compatible to a Web3 wallet, and you can use like many websites now to tokenize your artwork, and then you could display it on your website and allow people to buy it directly from you. And is there a website where I can see this being applied? Yeah, let me think about it, and then we could type it a little bit later into the chat.
Okay, so we'll give you your answers in a little while. I can think of a number, but I'm feeling a little bit concerned about favoritism right now. Maybe we'll add a list of links to the questions at the end. So we have 4 minutes, and so why don't we end with a question about what, like, if we come back to you, Devang, what potential impact do you think that these things that we've been talking about will have on art worlds and also wider society? Like, why does it matter to the wider world that the art world might be changed in the ways that we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I feel two things. One, the art world specifically has been accessible to a few people, right? Either folks who are very interested in that market, or people who really have the time and space to own art and go to galleries and things of that nature. I feel that as blockchain and technologies like blockchain make it more mainstream, more accessible, a broader set of audiences across the globe can access it. For example, I'll just use a few numbers, right? If you take Artsy, which was my last big project, even the overall website viewers had around 4 million uniques viewing the site in any given month. 4 million in the context of 5 billion users globally having access to the internet is a pretty small number. So at the highest rate, less than 0.1% of the market was accessing art, right? And so I feel that blockchain as a means to access opens up a lot more doors than any time before that have opened for the art market. On the flip side, I do think that the challenges that we face today with making blockchain simple to understand, mainstream to use, the questions that folks have asked, our job as folks at the forefront of this technology is to make sure that it's as easy to understand and use for everyone to be able to digest it. I think it's not quite there yet. And that's my sort of challenge, whether it's on the art side or on the economic side. I think on the economic side, Bitcoin as a methodology still has a lot of challenges in front of it, and it's only one component of the blockchain, right? So I think it's a two-sided coin, like many things in technology. It has a lot of potential, but a lot of work still needs to get done, as Misha was saying.
I mean, I think also that I missed to talk earlier and then caught a little bit of the recording with the artist Sparrow, who's working on the Invisible Economies project with the Dada NYC. And I think there's a whole other realm of work going on here, which is about off-market, about like other forms of relationship that are taking place in the art world that are really not to do with the same art market system that. Yeah, so
exactly, and on the tech side as well, Ruth, like big tech giants, right? Facebook and the Calibra project, big tech giants are trying to take interest in this, right? Because it's not just for a few people to understand. It's companies like Facebook and Amazon and PayPal will actually make access to blockchain go mainstream. Until that happens, it'll be accessible only to a few, right?
Yeah, for better or for worse.
Better for worse.
Let's add, yeah.
I would just only add to this that. We're right now talking virtually, right? We are communicating constantly through social media. I mean, all of this communication, I feel like the traditional art world is a little bit needs to be integrated in these types of communications. That the way the traditional art market behaves, where it's like not, I don't know necessarily how to put it, but like you had to go to a museum or a gallery, or you had to go to an art fair to be exposed to art. And I think that's all changing. And blockchain is one of the technologies that will power this kind of transition, so that these types of experiences
Absolutely
will have art in it.
Same example, right? If I go off of Misha's last point, when Beethoven was alive, right? When Beethoven was alive, only a few people could actually go to his concert and listen to him. But as soon as the internet happened, maybe a generation after his death, everyone had that tune on their computers, right? So that same analogy could apply here. If blockchain was as successful as the internet has been, we could see art, for example, reach many more millions of people than even an artsy could do in a 4 to 5 year time frame. So I think that's the hope, that these technologies just multiply every generation. And the bet is that even individuals like us can not just communicate, can transact as efficiently on the blockchain than it is today.
Okay. You raised many questions that we're not going to get to, but let's wrap up with I think this really good question actually from the audience is the traditional art world afraid of the transparency offered by blockchain technology to the point of not adopting it?
I will say that it's maybe not the correct way to say that the traditional art world is afraid of the transparency. I think there's certainly some players in the art market that will get squeezed by this transparency, and maybe not everybody is excited about the transparency. Maybe I don't want to have in public realm information about what I own, things of that sort. But there's plenty of kind of participants in the art market that are excited about the change, and they're actually interested in transparency. If I'm a collector and I'm trying to acquire an artwork of a specific artist, I want to know their history. I want to know where they're shown, how much they've sold for. This type of information is relevant to me as a collector. And if I'm an artist, I don't see why the transparency of my history is necessarily hurting me as a creator. But I could see that there are some players who are, where, they're charging like certain commissions and taking advantage of the lack of transparency. Maybe they're hurt by it, but I wouldn't say that that's the main thing. The main thing is that probably some transparency is more about kind of privacy of information. Maybe some people are not excited about sharing, what they acquire or what they're doing online.
Yeah, I think that there's an element. There's certainly an element of the high art world where mystique is really part of the value of the art, I think. But Devang, do you have anything to add to what Misha's?
I tend to agree. Like to answer the question and building off of Misha, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all solution to the answer. Like not everyone is opposed to blockchain. Not everyone's like interested in blockchain. The other sort of angle to it is the art world in general slow to adopt technology, right? The reason being technology is not the core of people who work at the art market, right? Their core is thinking about the art, finding the best sort of artists and growing the careers and things of that nature. Investment in tech itself is a little bit more difficult for the art market. Blockchain is one step further away and one step further higher. And it's, again, not one size fits all solution. Some companies, Christie's, for example, Sotheby's, they're all investing heavily in technology. And there is, in especially during the pandemic, one of the things that resonated me when I was hearing the Microsoft CEO in the last earnings, he said, the pandemic has forced 3 years worth of digital transformation within 3 months, right? Yeah, that story is true of the art market as well. I've seen tremendous adoption, not just of communication tools like Zoom and Teams and others, but also other parts of the tech chain in the last 3 months in the art market. We've all been showcasing millions of viewing rooms. That concept didn't exist. So I think there is some aspects of the art market that has adopted technology much faster. And now I feel that after the pandemic, and as we were talking before this call started, post-pandemic, users are not just suddenly going to start going to galleries more than they used to. Digital is here to stay, and I think users have sort of embraced it. and so the art market also has to adopt and embrace it further.
I would also add that maybe that since we brought up internet of the 80s, I still remember buying airplane tickets before internet, where you literally had to call every airline to find out how much it would cost to fly from, like, I don't know, New York to Chicago.
Right.
And then you compare the prices, and there were some telephone services available that would do it for you.
Right.
But just because internet all of a sudden exposed all these prices to everyone, didn't make like the airline industry disappear. I think that it just made it more efficient and potentially attracted more customers to it, because they were kind of more. It became transparent. You know, like if you wanted something, you would know how much it costs and you would know what your options are. So maybe it's kind of similar thing may happen with the art market as well.
Okay, guys, we have to wrap up.
Okay.
They gave us an extra 5 minutes. We took it. We've done well with it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth. Thanks,
Yeah.
Nita.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.